Hello, everybody, and welcome to Point of Purchase by geekspeak Commerce. On this show, we connect with experts in e-commerce to talk about all things retail, technology, business strategy, and so much more. My name is Isaac Wanzama. I'm the founder and chief strategist at geekspeak Commerce, and I'm lucky enough to be your host for today's episode. This episode is a third in our spin-off series called Canadian Commerce, presented in partnership with our good friends at BrandSpark International. In case you missed it, we launched this series to share quality data and insights about e-commerce in Canada. Now, we work closely with brands, distributors, and retailers, as many of you do, and we know that accessing good Canadian data that's not inferred from the US is sometimes very, very difficult to do, which is where the folks over at BrandSpark come in. By leveraging their e-commerce shopper study, which focuses specifically on Canada, we pair that with our years of digital experience, their research expertise to come up with meaningful insights and data points about a variety of product categories to help you do your job better. And today, the category we're focusing on is vitamins and nutritional supplements. Now, if you're in Canada, you know it's cold and flu season, and it's also New Year, New Me part of the year. So it's no surprise that vitamins and nutritional supplements are top of mind for a lot of people. It's also not surprising that there's many shifts in how consumers are buying products in this category, and there's been some growth as well. So a lot of things happening in this category for sure. Now, joining me to dive into these findings and more is Dennis Hancock, Vice President of Strategy at BrandSpark International. Dennis, how are you?
Great, Isaac. How are you?
Not bad. Thank you for bearing with me through that intro. It's also the worst part of the show for me. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Excited to be here and looking forward to getting into this.
This is a really cool one. So before we dive into the chat with Dennis, I just want to remind all our viewers around the world that if you do have questions for myself or for Dennis, please leave them in the comments and we'll take them up before the end of the show. So with that, Dennis, let's get started. Are you ready? Are you hyped?
I am ready and I'm hyped. Let's go.
Fantastic. So Dennis, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your role at BrandSpark, and we'll start from there.
Well, about myself, that's the least exciting part of the discussion. So I'll try to make it quick. I'm the VP of Strategy at BrandSpark. BrandSpark's a market research and consultancy firm that's been around about 20 years, a little over that. I've been with them for 13. Main roles around discovering and trying to integrate insights into our clients' strategies, and I'd say across the teams. To briefly summarize the main role with a lot of the companies we work with, there's a lot of really big reports out there, 50 pages, 100 pages, etc. When there is a summary, there's a lot of very, very short executive summaries. One is too much information for a lot of stakeholders to digest. One is too succinct, doesn't give you enough context. So a lot of my work is around trying to Goldilocks that middle, just enough information told the right way so everybody can really understand it, get that buy-in, and really help drive some changes in the organization.
That's fantastic, and I can imagine BrandSpark really being a godsend for a lot of executives, brand managers, retailers, trying to make good decisions around their e-com strategy. So I think it's a valuable role you play. Before we get into the data and talk about this category, can you remind us what the e-commerce study is about and what it entails?
For sure. So BrandSpark's been one of the leading researchers about the Canadian consumer, the Canadian shopper, going on 2 decades. We've been running one of the largest shopper studies in Canada for many years on all forms of different behaviors. And that's led to different branches as different interests emerged from our clients and different trends swept through society. One was around trust. We do a lot of work around trust now and the driver of that, which is important to all elements of the business. And the other one, obviously, is e-commerce. Pretty big deal for a lot of people, obviously. So starting back in about 2016, we started doing a very focused component on e-commerce, specifically within Canada. Like you said, we found a lot of clients, a lot of organizations were really missing some of that Canadian data and context. They're having to infer what some U.S. counterparts might be talking about, or they didn't have any data at all. So we survey thousands. I think the last round was about 7,000 Canadians across a number of different categories. And we really focus on that specific number of different categories. It's not the online shopper. Online shoppers don't shop every category the same way, and each category has its own dynamics. So we dig into each one.
Right, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I mean, we're going to see certainly some of the results that came out of that study, but it's an invaluable tool. I mean, we start everything we do with strategy, and that really is about data. And if you can't find data, you can't build out a good roadmap. Now, let's talk vitamins and nutritional supplements, which is the topic of today's episode. Let's set the stage in the space. How big is it? What's happening in this category?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the important ways to set the stage, like I said, we cover a lot of different categories. I think there's about 16 we went into in depth in this study last year. The vitamins and supplements category was the one that had overall the most dynamic shifts taking place, both in terms of a number of factors we're going to walk through today in terms of the overall size, but also the buying behavior within it, et cetera. So 3 headlines before I get into specifics on the size is one of the biggest growth rates for the number of consumers shopping this category online, a big change in which specific brands that they're buying, a lot of switching going on, and a lot of shoppers looking to save some money, looking for some lower prices, even though it's a less price-driven category than others, which is a bit counterintuitive. But digging into that first one, we saw a 7% bump among online shoppers of people that are actually shopping in this category. And to put that further into context, that took it up to 31%. So you could also rephrase that. So there's been an almost 23% increase in the number of shoppers in this category online over a 1-year period. And we like making reference points across the categories. It's essentially at the same level as grocery and some of the food categories now. So there's just as many people shopping this category online as grocery. So a lot of big growth, a lot of new shoppers coming in.
Right. That's very interesting. I mean, this growth specifically online, is that in line with all categories overall? Or is there specific interest in driving those sales? Are people just looking for more, options in this category and therefore they're going online?
I think we get a lot of people looking for additional options. It had lagged a little bit, like I said, on the food side. I think there are more people adding those sort of vitamins and supplements across. And
right.
I do think a lot of the behavior coming in, which we'll get into, is people are looking for some switching in, some lower prices and convenience as well. And the online channel is particularly good for that. But we do like to highlight as well. So there's been that huge growth in shoppers coming in.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily match the exact growth rate of the category in terms of sales, because even when you talk about that overall shopper group, of that 30%,
right.
A third of them, or 10% of shoppers overall, are making the majority of their purchases in this category online. So if you get down to that group, about 10% of shoppers, or 1/3 of this category shoppers, they represent about half the sales within the category. So you want to be thinking about the overall pie and how to grow that, and all these new people coming in, but realistically also, sitting there today, there is this segment within there that's really driving a lot of the sales numbers in the category right now.
Right. So those who are buying are buying a lot of it.
Absolutely. There's a group. It's about a third that they're buying a lot of it, and they're making essentially all of their purchases online. For them, this category is an online purchase, and that's it. There's a lot of other than shoppers that it's a bit of a mixed match. Maybe they'll buy something online or one product online or once or twice a year, but you see that sort of different levels of shift. And typically that pattern kind of plays out. People usually dip their toe a bit at first, one or two things that they switch over, and then we see that continued shift over time.
So let's step back and kind of look at the big picture a little bit here. How big is the market overall? I mean, what percentage of Canadians are taking, supplements? We know that consumers are generally moving towards, healthier choices in everything they buy. But how big is this category?
I don't have the exact number for the number of Canadians taking vitamins and supplements overall. Like we said, focusing within on the e-commerce side, it is 1 in 3 online shoppers, and a massive portion of society's online shoppers are making this category purchase. And I'd put it somewhere sort of within that range from an overall level. There won't be too many more people that are, once you start reflecting it from outside the online channel. And often in this case, and we'll get into it when we get a bit more on the demographic side, often when we see some of the lower numbers online, it's because in most categories, older shoppers are less likely to be buying online. There's still more of an in-store component relative to the younger demographics. But this is one of the categories where older shoppers have really jumped in online. So it's a bit of a divergent one there.
Right. So let's touch, briefly on sort of the brand players there. Is this one of those categories where you're seeing fairly new brand entrants, or are they sort of a few incumbents that are kind of the gorillas, if you will?
We are seeing a lot of new brand entrants and brand switching. So when we talk about those category shoppers coming online, about half of the shoppers say, I basically buy the same thing that I do in store. So for them, it's just a channel shift. I was buying such and such vitamin or such and such supplement at this store. Now I buy it online. Fine.
Right.
50% of shoppers buy at least a mix of different brands online. And the majority of those, or about 30% of overall, say they're buying entirely different brands online than they do in store. So we particularly highlight during these stages when shoppers are coming in. Yeah, for a number of them, they're sticking with what they're doing before, so you're going to see a bit of a channel shift. But it really is a time of discovery. It really is a time of change where people are evaluating different choices, and you have a big portion of the market switching over. So there's the channel impact, and a lot of the brand switching happening.
No, that's fantastic. Now, let's talk about the nature and sort of the cycles in the purchase, purchase behavior. I touched right off the top, but it's new year, new me, new us, Dennis here. Is the new year, impacting that? Is this a category where, around the year, there's different levels of purchases?
Yeah, not from this study in particular, because it was conducted in June, but we do a number of other studies throughout the year, et cetera. I know the stuff on timing. January is essentially a magical month, as you referenced, for this category in particular. So we, for reasons behind purchases, one of the frameworks we talk about is prevention and promotion. Prevention, like avoiding bad things, promotion, good things. Sure. As you referenced with the cold and flu season, that's kind of a prevention type thing. But the really big animal there is the promotion side. That new year, new me, people looking to enhance, people looking to do new things, et cetera, et cetera. And then the underrated component of what's driving that is all this is happening, and it's January and it's cold and people stay home more and they can be online more. So when you're talking about the online category shopping, you've got all these people in this mindset trying to change their lives a little bit or continue that on, and they're more likely to be at home, more likely to be making those purchases. So it's just sort of a perfect time for the category. Yeah,
there's a lot of variables that kind of driving that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So before I get into the next question, just want to take a quick reminder to our viewers that you are watching Point of Purchase Canadian Commerce Edition, a dose of data from the online health and wellness category presented in partnership with geekspeak and BrandSpark International. If you do have any questions for myself or Dennis, he's given us a lot of knowledge already. Feel free to leave those in the comments and we'll take them back at the end of the show. So back to our question, Dennis, you started to talk a little bit about the demographics here, but who is shopping in this category? How are they shopping, and what does that look like in terms of change over the past year?
What's amazing for this category is it's the one that's most consistent across the age groups, the demographic breaks, et cetera. It seems to be more, for the most part, a more kind of psychographic thing in terms of the people that take supplements, take nutrients, et cetera. As I referenced a little bit earlier, typically what we see across most categories is online adoption. If you pick your bar chart in front of you for the youngest age groups, it's way off to the right. It's bigger, and then it continues to decline as you get into the older age groups. Right. This one, it flips, and I think some of the reasons are obvious. As people get older, they're more likely to take vitamins and supplements. But this is actually a category where 65-year-olds, for example, are essentially just as likely of the online shoppers to be buying this category as the younger age group, somebody 25 to 34, 35 to 44. So we get a lot of age splits in there. Male and females, pretty close. There's a ton of categories, particularly around personal care, et cetera, where females are still much more likely to be buying in the category and buying online. But here we see relatively overall split. Might be different things specifically. Right. One of the ones that we have highlighted as an opportunity area, particularly on that promotion side, is it is a category where the younger age group, sort of that 18 to 24-year-old, somewhere in that range, they're actually a lot lower right now in terms of the category adoption. Again, there is some logical sense to that because as you get older, you're more likely to take some of the vitamins and supplements. But there might be some opportunities, particularly around those promotion type products, as you say, new year, new me, these things that can enhance your life, make you better today. We think there are some opportunities there as more and more people seek that opportunity to integrate vitamins and supplements into their nutrition plan. Right.
Now, let's kind of play startup for a second here. I'm a new startup and we're whiteboarding which category we want to enter. Is there anyone that just makes more sense or naturally, opportunity has more opportunity?
Specific types of
specific types of vitamins or product sort of demographic you should go after. Anything that kind of just kills it versus another?
I would say you'd want to combine a few different trends in what we're seeing out there. One is trying to make sure the product comes across as natural as possible. And
Right.
two, the stuff that seems, for a lack of a better scientific word for it, different. So not like, a lot of people, once you start thinking about vitamins and supplements, people might jump straight to, vitamin C, vitamin A, there's a magnesium supplement, whatever it is. But there are a lot of things particularly that are not emerging, that have been around from a lot of places around the world that people have been using to enhance their lives and health, that may not have made quite as much of an inroads into Canada yet. And there's a lot of appetite for that and a lot of opportunity to expose them to some of these supplements and such that can enhance their lives. And again, we place particularly today, it seems like it shifts back and forth a bit, but more of that opportunity around in particular focus on making things better for people today, healthier today, more active today, versus the prepping for down the road. There's obviously a balance between the two in terms of trying to improve longevity and long-term health versus, being a better weekend warrior in a few days. But the first opportunity right now, it's leaning a bit more. And I think some of that's a natural continuation coming out of the COVID stretch, et cetera, where people became pretty there are definitely people focused on the long-term health, but also the here and now and trying to make the most of it.
Fantastic. Well, I could definitely resonate with that weekend warrior all day long. You kind of talked about a few demographics there, but let's get into the youngest of those, of that group. We're talking when it comes to children. Have you seen any change in terms of how supplements and vitamins are being marketed to children? I mean, I remember Flintstone vitamins shaped like the characters. Is this the same? Have things changed here in terms of how we are presenting these?
It seems pretty much the same. We haven't seen a lot of dramatic changes on the kids front. And one of the things that we like to talk about, and to give an analogy for it, we've done a lot of work historically in the restaurant industry. People often talk about kids, and the next thing you're talking about is the kids menu, and you're always talking about, toys and gifts and all that kind of stuff. So one of the first questions we always come back to if we're talking to companies, what do you mean by kids today? Ages specific, because that's actually a fairly narrow range, right? Where that kind of resonates through with them, maybe 5 through to 8 or 9. And in a lot of cases, you can start thinking more as kids. Kids aren't mini adults, but there is a mini adult component to some of them, or how they're being raised, or they want to, and parents are even buying for their kids from sort of that more mature mindset. So there's opportunities to be thinking around that. And again, we always like to take a segmented approach. It's and things like Flintstone vitamins and stuff to make it, hey, these kids need to be taking these to make it more acceptable, et cetera. But one example I like to use is there's a lot of kids that are, beyond just trying to keep them active, but really into sports, sort of high performance sports. The type of messaging that will resonate with those parents and around those kids is a bit closer to what you might traditionally think about as adults. And the only other element I'd add into that as the starting point for it, like I said, we do a lot of work around brand trust. There's a few different pillars you can see that drive whether or not trust is even more important for category. It's important in every category. One is just price, but that is like really expensive things. Trust is important.
Right.
Two main factors that apply here that we can bring together. If you ingest it into your body or it applies to your offspring, trust is exceptionally important for obvious reasons. So as you're looking at this category and thinking about kids, think about it maybe potentially less in terms of, flavors and fun, and more about, hey, the parents buying for them need to absolutely trust this purchase, and what can you do to enhance and amplify that trust?
And understand the benefits. And that's actually very good points there, Dennis. It leads into my next questions around quality of product. Obviously, when I talk about e-commerce, you can buy any product from almost anywhere in the world and it'll get shipped to you. Do consumers care about where the supplements are made? And more importantly, is made in Canada important to Canadians as they decide which product to buy?
They do. And I'll start with some very specific data points, and then I'll put them in context relative to some other ones. So if you ask Canadians specifically for this category, is it important to you that it's made in Canada? 27% will say it's very important. And if you extend that out to the second box, somewhat important as well, it jumps up to 70%. So there is a lot of positive reaction to made in Canada. But this is the big but. A list of some of the things that are more important to Canadians that they want to see from the vitamins and supplements. Health Canada approved rates higher, clinically tested rates higher, extra strength, proven formula, hyperallergenic.
Right.
And there's a few more that go on down the list. So typically the way to shorthand it, and of course it varies by specific products sometimes and brands, but it's valuable, it's important, but it's more as kind of a tiebreaker, if you know what I mean. There's other ways to communicate that quality, etc. So it's a good thing to have, but there's a lot of things above it that shoppers will be looking for before that sort of made in Canada thing might tilt them over the edge. And we have seen a number of brands across many categories that have been kind of thwarted by that a little bit, where they see something like a number, hey, made in Canada is important. If I throw that and feature it up top, my product's going to fly off the shelves. It's more of a support piece than a lead message most of the time.
Absolutely. And I imagine one of those factors is really around pricing and strategies like that, which kind of leads me to my next question. Let's go back to my startup, fictional startup that I made up. That's kind of thinking about tactics and ways to really drive sales and influence consumer decision making. Are tactics like subscribe and save playing a role in how we're buying vitamins and other products in this category?
Yes, and this is one of the areas where, and around subscribe and save and pricing, where this category is particularly interesting right now. There's a few different opportunities for different startups to potentially take different strategies. So as one starting point going into it, like I said, a lot of shoppers are looking to save money in this category right now. They are looking for things at lower prices, and this is important. We'll come back to this in terms of a value equation standpoint. Now, as soon as you say that, a lot of marketers are like, of course, consumers want things cheaper. But what's interesting with that is while they say they're actively seeking it, there's some very strong signs that it's not just a, hey, I'm going to go for the cheapest thing element. One is, it's a very subtle one. We evaluate in the study how people sort a category when they're online. And one of the options, as a lot of people know online, is from cheapest to most expensive, or most expensive to cheapest. This is one of the categories least likely to be sorted from cheapest to highest price. Even if you go into like personal care, household care, it's much more likely. This category is actually, it's pretty closely aligned with cosmetics on this front. Right. So even though shoppers are seeking out lower priced products, it's not that they're trying to be cheap. There's just sort of an indication the value equation is broken a little bit. They think they might be paying a little bit too much. They're trying to knock it down. And then on the convenience element, where I recognize it's been a roundabout route to your actual question. Right. This is the category that simultaneously had the biggest increase on the subscribe and save front. We saw it pop up there at around 12%. People indicating it this year. So there's a convenience element to that and a savings element. And for a lot of different vitamins and supplements, particularly ones where you might take a certain amount each day or whatever it is, it lets itself act absolutely naturally to that subscribe and save. So if we're talking to a startup in general before we got into their specific products, say, hey, right now, picture the shopper coming to this category online, and this is a really good time to be launching sort of new products going online. They are actively seeking and considering other brands. Like I said, 50% or so are buying brands different what they did in store. And this is a category where people are much less likely to search by a brand name. They actually start with the sort of generic term. So there's a lot of opportunity in there. They're looking to save money a bit, but they're not looking for the cheapest option. So they're still like, you can come in here and differentiate in different ways around that quality side, et cetera. And while they are looking around, they're profiling as the type of customer that it's not like they're going to keep looking around forever. There's a significant segment in there that's taking a look around, trying to land on what they want. And either the subscribe and save is like the dream option in a lot of cases. It's automatically done. But another sort of similar behavior, we're seeing a lot of, this is a category that's, I think, number 2 overall in terms of repeat purchases. Even if they didn't have the subscribe and save, it's the click from last order, reminded from my history. There's a lot of repeat off that. So Absolutely. A lot of different elements going on in there, and a lot of different opportunities for different brands to take some different strategies depending on their positioning and price point, et cetera.
Definitely. And we definitely have seen that reorder from the last one play really great opportunity for brands on platforms like Instacart as an example, right? I mean, you could drive right from the acquisition and have a customer for life, if you will. So it's really, really interesting there. Now,
absolutely. And one of the other things I'd say there, and I know we'd spoken about this a little bit before, one of the interesting things we're looking at in this category is we have, and a lot of other places have often labeled vitamin supplements as a non-food category.
Right.
But in a lot of ways, it's a lot like food. It's vitamins and supplements. It's a replacement for. And if you look at how people shop this category, it's kind of halfway between food and like a more durable good. Like they're buying a lot more of it online than they would normal food, but they think about it the same way, but they're more likely to subscribe and save, etc. Right. One of the interesting elements that comes from that as you monitor that going forward, we of course all know the Amazon effect, and Amazon's the dominant player in everything online. The more that it's thought of in relation to food, or that overall a lot of the number of other stores come in and play a more relevant role, and you can start having some more of those conversations around, okay, in terms of even distribution channel and retail partners, the grocery stores themselves, and the pharmacies, etc. I think there's going to be a lot more diverse set of retailers that play for the share of the sales than we see in a lot of other categories.
Right, that's fantastic. And kind of leading into the next question, you kind of alluded to this a little bit. Let's talk about brand loyalty. I mean, I walk into my local grocery store, and most Canadians should probably attest to this. You go to that section, and there's some names that kind of take that main shelf that you see. How does brand loyalty play into this? Are there, once I discover it, that's what I'm sticking with? And you kind of alluded this a little bit. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit, Dennis.
Yeah, and when we talk about brand loyalty, a lot of what we see referenced before, but didn't get into in detail, a lot of it comes down to brand trust. So a lot of the language that we use, when customers are really loyal to a brand, they trust it, and we say this word resiliency. They trust it a lot more than other ones. It'd be that idea, this is the only brand that I will use. And the biggest indication that we have right now, again, that there's a little bit less loyalty that there was before, and we're seeing a lot of these people switching, is people are coming online, they're doing their search just on the generic term as opposed to the brand name, and they are showing a lot of behavior around switching, etc. And I do think a lot of it does come down to right now that price element on the value equation side. And we see this across a lot of categories where when you talk to brands, people coming in around trust, a lot of us naturally and marketers naturally go to things like, it's about your relationship with the customer and values and some issues around sustainability, et cetera. All those things are great, but they're at the top of the pyramid. The base of the pyramid of any trusted relationship is the value equation, what you get for what you pay. Right. And I think in this category and a lot of adjacent categories on health and wellness, a lot of brands have to take a step back and look at their value equation. What is the price for the quality that you get? And for a lot of the different, I won't get into specific ones, but if you look at some specific categories, this happens a lot. When you are in a particular line where there's multiple brands that all of them indicate they're natural, all of them are tested, and there's a price difference this wide, consumers go, wait a second, you haven't convinced me that you're worth it. And I think a lot of brands have to take that step back and look at that as we are seeing the shifting behavior, a bit of lower trust levels, a bit loyalty. You can change a lot of things around channel and marketing and message, but look at that core value equation and make sure it makes sense.
Right, and I think more importantly, it does what it says it's going to do, which I think, which we were talking about there. But which kind of leads me to an interesting question. We kind of touched on this when we were kind of getting ready here, Dennis. How much impact in terms of the science of vitamins and nutritional supplements, how much that is affecting consumers' choice?
It affects consumers' choice a lot, and somewhat some other food categories. It's again an area where there's two divergent things happening, and you kind of, again, depending on your particular line, particular brand, you almost have to choose a lane. There's on the one side, there's the science is continually improving things and finding ways to enhance things and add to things and modify things and, improve, et cetera, et cetera. And there are people that are sort of drawn to that. Right. The other end of the extreme that we talked about a little bit, there is I want things to be natural. I want things to be as, as close to they used to be as possible. Strip everything out. Take away I don't want things. I want things to go back. So you've got these sort of two disparate sides, and they both have a lot of positivity. And even for a given shopper, there might be one thing they lean one way and one thing they lead the other. So we have seen some continuation with those behaviors where one of the less discussed things, again, coming out of the COVID pandemic time, is there's actually quite a bit of an uptick we saw in shoppers and just the value they put on R&D and research and science in general. There's an interesting knock-on effect as all that was happening. People are like, oh yeah, science does a lot of things. But on the flip side of it, there's also the part of people's heads saying, yeah, I don't want all those things added in. So you've got to, again, find that balance. And that's, as again, we layer all these things across, and that's what makes this category so interesting for us overall. There's a lot of different opportunities. And if you start to matrix that out, and one of those things that we've said, it's you're working with a specific brand. If you try to go after the nutrition supplement customer overall,
right,
you're dead. You need to pick your segment. Okay, within this, based on what our value proposition, who are our strengths. Forget about that 100% of the people in the market right now. We want to bring in some more. What are the sort of 20 or 30% or whatever that number is that really makes sense for us based on their behavior, all those kind of different elements that play in.
Right. And I think that's actually very, very good advice there. And number 12 here, Dennis, there's probably marketers and strategists kind of sitting right now, kind of thinking about, what is our go-to-market here? What do we think about, and how do we kind of get to our customer? Any other takeaways for that demographic of people who are sitting around these whiteboards and trying to put that together, out of your study, and for those folks, what are some key takeaways to kind of leave them with?
There's a couple of small things that I know that I've skipped over, but I think they're important things to remind people of when they go through. One is smartphone usage for purchases in this category are actually really low. So right now, it's only about 34% of people making a purchase in this category are using a smartphone. By comparison, there's some categories like household care, et cetera, that are up around 54, some others up around 60, et cetera. So this is sort of a later stage thing than some of the sort of the earlier planning and strategies. There's obviously been a lot of discussion in the media as people talk through, hey, everybody lives on their smartphone now. Everybody does everything on their phone. We've got to optimize everything around that single screen, et cetera. For this particular category, it's still the vast majority of consumers say they're on a laptop or a desktop. So different interface, different thing to picture and start there. And again, it's a little bit different by category. I do think the other thing I would think about it as they're sitting there talking about it and planning it out, and this difference between the offline and online world. A lot of the online journey and search process for that purchase, depending on what type of store they're going through, it's kind of self-guided. So if you think about it, and a lot of us use as a starting reference point a traditional store, be it a department store or pharmacy, et cetera. But let's use a department store, like a Walmart or a grocery store type thing. You've got all your food stuff over here. And then over here by the medicines somewhere, there's a bunch of nutrition and supplements. And that's the way it is. So there's actually a consumer walking out of the food section, walking into this more medical tech section, and they make their choice. I believe, and as we're seeing some of these behaviors in the shopping online, there might be a different way to think about that journey. And when they're buying those vitamins and supplements online, maybe it's a more integrated process into that food purchase. And I like to think of it as that portal where you're not jumping to this hardline aisle over here that feels more medical and too close appointments and all that kind of stuff. Is there something different that we can think about that and how the, say, vitamins and supplements might fit more directly into those breakfast purchases being made, which is a common time for people to be taking vitamins and supplements? Hey, what can we do a little bit differently there in terms of that placement or some of those pairings? What are some of those opportunities around that? And from an overall perspective, I think those were the two sort of ones that jumped out. The final and another reminder too that comes through from our research continuously, people search these things in various different ways, but particularly during these times of discovery, the ratings and reviews online are absolutely crucial. It is critically important that those are done right. We actually, our sister company, Shopper Army, does a lot of this work on this front. There is a lot of misconceptions around those. It's not something, you don't have to have a 5-star rating. In fact, if anything, a 5-star rating can look suspicious because people are very suspicious of certain types of reviews because everybody's seen a lot of them game. What people do like to see are extensive reviews with a lot of details. And in a lot of those cases, even if there is some negativity in there, as long as it's in some sort of context in terms of it wasn't right for this, etc., it plays an absolutely critical role. So you can get all of your placement correct, communication correct, but if those early reviews aren't great, it can really set you back. And one of the key things for that, which actually leads to success on that front, is making sure, again, a startup coming in, a new product coming in, making sure your first buyers are the right buyers. When we talk about that segmented market, and there's so many different interests and groups within this market, everybody wants to sell stuff at the start. The challenge is if you sell to the wrong people, they're going to be unhappy. And a few of those people are going to post some potentially negative things. Or if you actually find that right segment for you, it sort of creates that snowball effect and helps drive that organic growth.
I think that the comment and review, rating reviews is really important because it goes back to your point around brand trust, right? And we know that consumers trust reviews more so than what the brand is telling us. So that's really cool. What's your price?
One other thing, if I can go outside of the research in this category specifically, we try to apply some of the learnings and lessons we see from other categories as well. That same idea for a lot of people historically, we think of sort of vitamins and supplements, those things people take and kind of hide in the cupboard.
Right.
Etc. I do think there are certain types of supplement, particularly things that give people extra energy today and stuff like that, that people, for lack of a better word, aren't ashamed of, or they might have it, say, sitting out on the counter with their smoothie section or stuff at home. Right. One of the subtle things you can think about there is in terms of just the packaging and container. So it might not be something that's thought about as much in this category as some others. Right. The liquor category has obviously been huge on that front, where people always, a lot of it's just sold in the bottle. But we also look at it, even things like cooking oil. You can kind of see it the same way, where if you go into that sort of grocery store, you can see oftentimes the olive oil itself, it's like a piece of art on the bottle that people are proud to have sitting out there. Maybe it's worth a couple of extra thoughts on that front in terms of, hey, if your particular vitamin or supplement you're talking about is the right kind of one that you could picture, say, sitting on a smoothie bar there, that, hey, maybe there is something extra we want to do around this packaging in this particular case, because it may become part of who they are as a person, as part of their identity, and have it out there. It can be some of those small little shifts can play an important role.
Yeah, and I think those are probably things you don't think about from a packaging standpoint in these categories, right? It's almost like it's not quite medicine. So sort of a great looking package to put on the counter that these are my vitamins doesn't exist.
And as you think about that, and again, when you're talking about if you're sitting around in the room planning it, we often like to recommend going back to the basics, where picture yourself as somebody that doesn't know much about this category, certainly probably not as much as the people sitting in the room planning it, etc. Right. And just force yourself to go into your e-commerce retailer of choice or Google sale of choice and see what you're hit with, and just sort of feel the sort of, in some cases, overwhelming similarity of multiple products that look exactly the same and seem to just be sort of making the same claims, and take that step back and say, okay, for somebody coming in here new and they see what about us is going to stand out? In a lot of the cases, the reality is when we're talking about a lot of supplements and nutritional things, a lot of the components, some of the core components are the same, right? There's certain metrics, there's certain things people can check. What is it that's going to be, what's different? What will make it stand out? What are those little things that we can tweak on that front? And sometimes outside of all the data, where it's important to size the opportunity and identify your segment and see where it goes, that step back to basics can take you a long way.
That's fantastic. Dennis, this has been awesome. And thank you so much. I hope everybody was taking as many notes as I have in this conversation. Thank you so much for watching today, Dennis. You know, we always like to finish off with a fun question on the show. Otherwise, it's not point of purchase. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What was the last health or wellness product you bought? Where did you buy it? And how was that experience?
Yeah, the challenge here is a fun question, but in addition to my work in research, my background is in economics. So sometimes my answers don't always skew towards a fun answer. But I do think this is an important one where, and it's a good example. This is a very true example. So it goes outside of nutrition and supplements directly, because I'm going to keep those secret still. But one thing on what I consider the wellness side is I did go through to make recent purchase around some essential oils for a diffuser for a small yoga studio I have at the back of my house. Okay. And I've bought a few before, but I like to approach it. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about the category. That experience for me starting at the start was, and I Googled, etc. First click led me to Sage, which had bought an ad at the top where it was $26 per 10 milliliters. And second click came through was to Amazon, which took me to a page with, you got like 13 bottles the same size for $26.
Right.
And as somebody looking at that category, and I'm seeing this, I feel, across a lot of health and wellness categories, as a starting point, I'm looking at a value equation line of $2 a bottle versus $26 a bottle. And obviously there's multiple bottles, but that kind of range.
Right.
Actually, and I wasn't sold necessarily on either end of that range. And then there's a few things scattered in between. It was really interesting and challenging to try to sort out that category, and particularly sort of the differentiation points in between for some of those products that were coming in. And even before I got into the details of it, it's like $2 a bottle seems way too cheap. Yeah, exactly. There's something wrong there. That was my initial gut reaction, even though I'm not saying there necessarily was. $26, I'm probably not willing to invest that much. And as I tried to figure out that line, it was very, very confusing. So I'd say, I did end up somewhere closer to the $2 than the 26, but it was a really painful experience. And I do think that there's opportunities in this category right now where I've seen some similar things in searching for some exercise bikes and some various things where It's really easy. And again, everybody's online experience is different. We always try to remember that everybody's search and modifies themselves. I find it really easy to get a highly curated, what I call very premium product offer that's really, really expensive, and very easy to find a heavily discounted sort of volume thing, particularly through a certain store.
Right.
I find it challenging right now to find the brands and/or retailers really kind of differentiating in between. And we talk about that value equation line starting from those 2 points. I think there's a lot of opportunity around that middle from a brand perspective, from how these things are sold in the retail perspective, to really deliver on, at the end of the day, most consumers are somewhere in the middle between two extremes.
So which one did you end up going with? Do we have the 13 pack, or did you shell out the $29 and get those single ones?
I went with something closer to multi-pack, not down to one of the cheaper ones.
Right.
Not the cheapest ones, but somewhere in between. And again, this isn't, I'm not knocking the more premium option. And I think it's actually genius. And so I think the price point has been perfectly picked for gift giving, et cetera. And I know my kids have chosen it for their mom. I think it's some great opportunities in there. But particularly, and I'd say, Mike, it's something that I'd like to, I use a lot, right? And I don't want the cheap. I want something good, but I'm not yet willing to invest the $26 per 10 milliliters good. And I had to do a lot of work to find that one that kind of landed in between. And if somebody made that a bit easier for me and stood out, well, making it easy to understand why it was better. And I know because it is amazing where you can eventually figure out the difference points. And I see this again across a lot of categories, but it takes some work because some of those cheaper products start out with some words that look really good too. And hey, this says it's natural and therapeutic grade. And it says it's this and that. Oh,
right.
I got to dig. Somebody make this a little bit easier for me.
Get on there. Well, somebody's got some work to do. Well, Dennis, thank you again. I mean, we've been talking for almost an hour, and I feel like we go on because there's just so much to be said about this category and just e-commerce in general. I want to thank you for taking the time to educate us here at Geekspeak Commerce and everybody else who's been watching it. And thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. And Dennis, if they do have questions, want to find out a little bit more about you, how do we find the details of what you spoke about?
The easiest way to contact us is through BrandSpark, and it's brandspark.com online, or the cheat version for anybody still listening. My email convention for that is my first initial D, last name HANCOCK @brandspark.com. If you say Isaac sent you, you'll get a even quicker response, even though we'd respond more quickly with anyone. And like I said, and Isaac was referencing, we have a lot of data from this study, from the shopper study, from the trust study, very specific data points that can help a lot of brands. But we also like to keep it in context where, as I think we've referred to throughout this conversation, the overall data is great and sort of points the ship towards the lighthouse, but each ship's a bit different. You really have to understand your own individual context and the segment you want to go after and who those opportunities are. And that's where we do a lot of work as well. So if there's any, we really specialize in some of those types of specific questions.
Well, fantastic. Well, everybody, be sure to reach out to Dennis. It'll be a great chat at a minimum. If you want to find out more about myself or our team here at Geekspeak Commerce, do visit us at geekspeakcommerce.com. Follow us, obviously, on social to find out about our next episode. And I think there's another BrandSpark episode not too far from now on another category. So we'll be back again.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Isaac. Appreciate the time. Bye-bye.